Welcome to the Way of Hermes podcast, where we explore the fascinating world of Hermeticism. I'm Jake, and joining me today is Emily. We're diving into a topic that's central to many spiritual traditions, the gods and their worship in Hermeticism.
That's right, Jake. It's a complex and nuanced subject within Hermetic philosophy. Today we'll be unpacking the Hermetic perspective on gods, worship, and how it relates to human spirituality.
Let's start with a fundamental question. In Hermeticism, are the gods considered worthy of worship?
Well, Jake, it's not a straightforward yes or no answer. The Hermetic texts, particularly the Corpus Hermeticum and the Asclepius, present a unique view on this matter. While the gods are acknowledged and respected, the primary focus of worship is directed towards the supreme God, often referred to as the One or the All.
So it's not that the other gods are unworthy, but rather that the emphasis is placed on the supreme deity.
Exactly. The Hermetic texts often describe humans as being equal to or even superior to the gods in some ways. For instance, in the Corpus Hermeticum, it's stated that man on earth is a mortal god and that the heavenly God is an immortal man.
That's a powerful statement. It seems to elevate the status of humanity in relation to the divine. But does this mean that Hermeticists are discouraged from worshiping the gods?
Not necessarily, Jake. The texts suggest that worshiping the gods is more of a personal choice rather than a strict requirement. The emphasis is placed on reverence and respect for the divine order, rather than specific acts of worship.
I see. So it's more about one's attitude and understanding of the divine, rather than ritualistic practices.
Precisely. In fact, the Hermetic texts warn against the dangers of idol worship. There's a fascinating passage in the Asclepius where Hermes Trismegistus discusses the creation of material gods or statues imbued with divine energy. According to the Asclepius, humans have the divine ability to create statues and imbue them with the souls of demons or angels. These statues then become a kind of earthly god. However, Hermes warns that these entities can be fickle and potentially dangerous if not handled with care and reverence.
Wow, that's quite a concept. It seems to blur the lines between human creativity and divine power. But it also comes with a cautionary note, right?
The texts emphasize the need for wisdom and discernment in these practices. It's not about blindly worshiping these created gods, but understanding the power and responsibility that comes with such abilities.
This brings us to an interesting point about the different types of people described in Hermetic philosophy. Can you elaborate on that, Emily?
Of course, Hermeticism describes a hierarchy of humanity, which is quite fascinating. At the top, we have what are called divine people, who are closely connected to the celestial gods and governed by nous, or divine intellect. Below the divine people, we have demonic people who are connected to demons. But it's important to note that in Hermeticism, demons aren't necessarily evil entities, but more like neutral spiritual beings.
That's an important distinction. And I assume there's a third category?
Yes, the third category is what we might call regular humans, who are primarily governed by their passions and desires. This hierarchy relates to different forms of worship and spiritual practice within Hermeticism. The divine people, being closest to the celestial gods, are thought to worship in silence, focusing on the supreme God. The demonic people might engage with the material gods we discussed earlier, while regular humans might be more inclined towards traditional forms of worship.
It seems that in Hermeticism, one's spiritual evolution is closely tied to their approach to worship and their relationship with the divine.
Hermeticism emphasizes personal spiritual growth and a direct connection to the divine. It's less about prescribed rituals and more about developing wisdom and understanding of the cosmic order.
That's a great point, Emily. Now let's shift our focus to the definitions of Hermes Trismegistus to Asclepius. How does this text contribute to our understanding of the gods in Hermeticism?
The definitions provide some interesting insights, Jake. They reaffirm many of the ideas we've discussed, particularly the notion of man's power being equal to that of the gods. For instance, Definition 8 states that man has as much power as the gods, and that only man is a free living being.
That's consistent with what we've seen in the Corpus Hermeticum. Does the text elaborate on the relationship between humans and gods?
Indeed it does. Definition 9 goes even further, stating that God is everything and there is nothing outside God, and that man exists because of God. Everything is because of man. This really emphasizes the central role of humanity in the cosmic order.
It sounds like the definitions reinforce the idea of human potential and our connection to the divine. But what about worship? Does it address that specifically?
Yes, and quite emphatically. The definitions contain strong warnings against idol worship. For example, it states, "Those who worship idols worship plain pictures. For if they worshipped with knowledge, they would not have gone astray."
That's a powerful statement. It seems to suggest that true worship comes from understanding rather than blind devotion to images or statues.
Exactly, Jake. The text emphasizes the importance of worshiping with knowledge and understanding. It also reiterates that God alone is worthy of worship, stating, "God listens only to man, and man to God. God is worthy of worship, man is worthy of admiration."
This brings an interesting perspective to our discussion. It seems that while the definitions acknowledge the existence of gods, they really emphasize the supreme God and the special role of humans. How does this compare to what we see in the Asclepius?
Well, the Asclepius takes a slightly different approach. It has a much stronger Egyptian flavor and goes into more detail about the gods and their relationship to humans. It introduces the concept of reverence, or eusebeia in Greek, which goes beyond mere worship. This term encompasses a broader ethical and moral dimension.
Interesting. So it's not just about performing rituals or offering sacrifices.
The Asclepius suggests that true reverence involves living virtuously and in harmony with the divine order. It's about recognizing the gods' role as governors of destiny and showing respect through one's actions and character.
How does this idea of reverence relate to the warnings against impiety that we find in Hermetic texts?
The texts, particularly the Corpus Hermeticum, warn against asabeia or impiety. This isn't just about failing to perform religious duties, but rather about living in a way that's out of alignment with cosmic order.
So impiety in Hermeticism is more about one's overall approach to life, rather than specific religious transgressions.
Precisely. It's about maintaining a proper relationship with the divine, which includes the gods, but ultimately centers on the supreme God. The Asclepius emphasizes that while we should respect the gods, our primary focus should be on cultivating a connection with the One.
This seems to tie back to what we discussed earlier about the hierarchy of humanity. How does the concept of reverence apply to the different types of people in Hermetic philosophy?
For the divine people we mentioned earlier, reverence might manifest as a deep, intuitive understanding of cosmic order. For demonic people and regular humans, it might involve more conscious efforts to align their lives with divine principles.
I see. And how does this relate to the creation and use of statues or material gods that we touched on earlier?
The Asclepius provides an interesting perspective on this. While it acknowledges the practice of creating statues imbued with divine energy, it warns against mistaking these creations for the divine itself. True reverence involves understanding the difference between the symbol and the reality it represents.
That's a crucial distinction, Emily. It seems Hermeticism encourages a more nuanced understanding of divine symbols and representations. Now, I'm curious about how the Asclepius addresses the relationship between humans and the gods. Does it offer any unique insights?
The Asclepius presents a fascinating perspective on the human-divine relationship. It suggests that humans have a special status in the cosmic order, stating that man is superior both to the gods, who are formed only of an immortal nature, and to all other creatures.
How does the text justify this elevated status of humanity?
Well, the Asclepius argues that humans are unique in their ability to bridge the material and divine realms. It states that humans are united to the gods in kinship, and that we worship them through religion and through purity of mind. At the same time, it says that the gods look down on all human affairs with tender love and take care of them.
So it's a kind of reciprocal relationship between humans and gods? That's intriguing. Does this mean that the Asclepius encourages the worship of gods more explicitly than the other texts we've discussed?
Not exactly, Jake. While the Asclepius acknowledges the practice of worshipping gods, it emphasizes that true spiritual growth comes from a pure philosophy that focuses on reverence for the supreme God. It describes this philosophy as one that has not been dishonored by the perverse curiosity of the mind. Hermeticism is more about personal mysticism. It's described as a personal, not public, process of seeking the divine on an intimate level. The goal is to touch something sacred, however briefly, rather than adhering to prescribed rituals.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Hermetic Dialogues, the official podcast of the Way of Hermes website. If you are interested in free articles on Hermeticism and related topics, or want to study this ancient tradition through our online course, be sure to visit our website at wayofhermes.com.